Welcome to another VFX Archive episode. Today we're going to try to tackle Houdini in its 6.5 iteration, I believe. I do have a video of Houdini 6.5 on the channel from years ago. It was on a tripod with the iPhone. But we're going to cover some different things than we did before. I'm going to briefly go over a few of the basics, the stuff you're used to, and I'm going to go over it quickly so we can get into some more meaty material, some more deeper dive into the feature set of Houdini. And so let's get going here. I'm going to jump into my Unix root here because this one on this particular build is a different directory structure. So I think it's this one here. So we're going to do what I usually do with these. As we'll go get, I think it's this one. Yeah, this is the one. The 6.567 version runs on this one. Let's see. Where are we? We are at the root. Okay, so here's a little trick so I don't have to type so much. I'll get this guy selected with the mouse, and then we'll go over here and we'll go change directory space, and then I'll middle mouse click, and because this guy is highlighted in another window, it will copy that. Bam. Where are we? We're there. Okay, so let's do our source Houdini _ setup. Boom, let's run the server, says netd. All right, Houdini. Let's get this going. Houdini 6.5. All right, I'm gonna start. This one's like a default scene here. And we'll turn on the grid. I'll zoom out a little ways here. And if we turn on everything, let's turn on these lights. And the ambient light and the camera, we should see. Let's see if we do smooth wire shaded here. Smooth shaded, I guess that's showing me everything here. Some lights and a camera and a default scene. I'm just get rid of this scene by going new. Discard and new. All right, so let's get into some basics here with Houdini. When you first open it up, technically it probably looks like this. It might look like this, and I have these open from a previous session. You might, if you're using Houdini in the modern app, you'll recognize this layout as the default one that most Houdinis open up with. And I always open up this little, there's some selection things here and some display items here where you can tell it to show the points and the normals and everything like that. Then there's this little shortcut here for wireframe and smooth shaded and whatnot. We have the grid. We also have this, C1 or all objects. There's a kind of an ortho perspective view here. There's return the view to home, all this kind of stuff. There's no camera in the scene. And so we'll get into that in a moment. And here's the, this is like our attributes parameters window, and this will be the node view. Okay, so let's do some basic stuff first here. We'll do some basic geometry creation here. I'll type tab here in the node view, and we'll do geometry. I'll just make a grid. For the floor here, we'll do grid. Or we'll call this the floor, actually. Floor, all right. I have that guy selected, hit enter to dive into it, and now we've gone down into, if you see here on this menu here, there's objects, and we're down into the SOP level. So from the object to the SOPS, which are surface operators, and these come default with this little put space G to zoom into that. And then this is a default thing here, and I noticed when we were looking at prisms the other day that this thing goes all the way back to prisms, but it's its little like file geometry representation. There's a little icon that it puts in the window. It comes with every geometry node. I'm going to go into here and we're just going to drop a grid on the floor. Boom. And we'll use this button over here to give priority to this. And what do we want here? We want this to be like 15, 15. And that's good for that. Go out of the surface operators back up to the objects level. Zoom out a little bit and let's go into our view here and we'll do smooth wire shaded so we can see what's going on here. And I hit S for selection. And so then you can select things. And what do I also need to do? I need to, oh, there's another display thing here. And turn off the grid, I guess, for a moment. And now that's our floor. And let's create a cube. So we'll do another geometry. So I'm going to use this cube later for something. Cube. And we'll dive into that. I'll hit tab for generators. And we'll go grab a box, is what they call that, geometry. Drop that in here. And then we'll get into some quick modeling stuff real fast. Before I do that, I'm actually going to move this guy up a little bit on this at the top level instead of moving it inside the surface operators. I'm just going to move this here like 0.5 so it's up on the surface. We'll dive back down into that and space G. Oh, no, I need to have that selected out here. Get close to that. Space G. Oh, here's space G. There we go. And now I'm holding space. Once I've selected something, you'll use space and mouse combinations to do the movements here. So I got the left is the orbit, the middle is the dolly, and the right is the people call this pan. It's actually truck. To move side to side is trucking, even though everybody refers to this as panning. Panning is actually rotating from the camera center, but everybody calls it panning. Let's see. So we're going to go inside the cube because we're going to modify this guy. And what I should do actually for this first thing is we'll get rid of the floor. We'll make the floor disappear while we're modeling on the cube. Dive back into surface operators, and so we can go over some other little functions here. So the first thing I want to do is we'll add some spans to this. And so we got to make this from a polygon to a polygon mesh. It comes with the spans that I kind of want to tweak. And for us to modify this, we need to drop an edit node. So the edit node will record the little movements and modifications we make to this. And I'm going to view this in wireframe to do this. So we'll do that, and we'll go over some display stuff here too. So if we look at, say, this stuff here, we can go up here. I can tell it to show the points, and you'll see here that it has this, like, it makes these little blue dots on the points. And if you just roll over these, there's like, you can put the numbers on them. Roll over this as point normals. Keep going down. There's texture coordinates, point positions. Shows you the position information. There's some primitive stuff and vertex numbers and all this. And this is good for like group information, which we'll get into in a little bit. So put those points on there, and I'm going to go over here and use this selection thing so I can select points, but I need an edit. So I'm going to tab, we'll hit edit, drop a edit down, and then we'll get into we'll drop this in here and invoke that. And now if we hit the select key and I go over here and I say, hey, I want to select the points, which you can also use the number 1. There's, like, you can see here, there's some shortcuts. So there's select 1 is points, 2 is edges, 3 is breakpoints, 4 is primitives for like the polygons if you want to select polygons. And now that I have that invoked, I got to use the space bar to move the view. And what we're going to do is same thing you saw me do in another couple of videos here, but it just gives you this breakdown of how to move geometry. So this is tricky. This is a little trickier than Maya and Soft Image because there's a sequence to this in Houdini, and the sequence is, like you've seen, I've selected it, but if I try to hit enter and move, it's like it doesn't quite do it. So if I hit this right click and then enter, and you see it's like it let it go, and it's an interesting thing. So I have to go back to select, and try to select these guys. And then let's see if I hit T. Now that changes the selection. Right click. There we go. Okay. So you're supposed to be able to select and right click, and it's either enter or Q or one of these things, and I have to keep fiddling with it. In Houdini 5.5, it says, you know, once you get it right, once you select, let me try this again here. If I hit Q and let it go, grab all these guys. Now look what it's telling me now. It's got this like select geometry to transform and right click to complete, middle mouse to select, and left mouse to select and drag. So now it's working. I don't know. So anyway, so now I have this selected, and we're gonna move these guys. We're gonna scale them up, and we're gonna move this, you know, just to show you how I get this stuff moved. And we're gonna use this later when we create geometry for particles to bounce off of too. So then we'll do that. And then Q, select here, right. Oh, here we go again. Same problem. I'm just not invoking something correctly here. Okay, enter. That worked, but it's not the right thing. Right click. Okay, there it goes. Yeah, there's some part of that sequence that I've not quite understand what the order of the operations is. So if you guys know the answer to that, let me know. There's some extra little hot sauce click thing that I'm not getting right. So I'm hitting Q to quit out of there, right click to, okay, yeah. And then move these guys to the corner here. So this is us just modifying geometry. Okay, quitting out of that. I don't have to use this now. I close off that. And so we've modified this here, and then the goal is that now that I've got this to the edges, when I run a subdivide, hitting tab, hit subdivide, this will give us the thing I usually do so I can round out the geometry here and make this a little bit cooler. And with this one, I wonder if we can run a subdivision, leave the geometry light. So we'll leave that there, go up to objects here, let's turn on the floor. And we'll just quickly get back to our scene. And let's go to this display, smooth shade wire. So there's our cube. And then I can do some other geometry. And you get the usual basic scene that we create when I do these basic tutorials for lighting. Let's do tab generators. I'm going to do a light. I'll create a light here, and then under this light we can go to shading. Let's see here, area shape, and then we're going to tell it to be a grid, and it's that. And then I wonder if we need 16 samples right off. Let's see if I make this 2, yeah, so I can scale that up quite a bit. Although it snaps back to 1. Let's see, 1.5. Leave that like that. And then just to make this clean, we'll put the lights down here, put the scene objects over here, and then we'll do a camera. Drop a camera in the scene. And now we have a camera. Let's take a look through it. And then in order to, when we move this, for the camera to stay with it, we have to hit this little guy here. So we're going to click that. So now when we move our view, we're going to be moving the camera with it. So I'll zoom out here. And let's see over on the other side. So we'll put this guy here, and then we can put it in a position where we know the camera will stay, and then I can unplug this, and now if I move around, that camera should still be there. Yeah, so now that keeps our camera view there. Then we can go back in here and cam 1, so we always can get back to that. And then as long as I don't click that camera item, it'll let me move from the view without disturbing the camera. All right, so let's check on our render here. We'll just do a quick thing. not that far in. So let's go to, we are going to need an output because in a new scene, there's no render engine default. We'll hit generators and we'll create our mantra. Just drop one in there. And we'll go back out to the scene level through our camera and we'll just ask, say, hey, Houdini, show us what mantra sees. It's going to be small. Actually, I think they start at like 320. Yeah, pretty tiny. So let's go to the camera. In the camera under view, let's do like a 720 by 486 and then have it draw that again. And we can see that there's no shadow. Let's take a look at this guy here. Looks pretty good, just no shadow yet. And I'm wondering, let's see, we'll leave that. Quit this guy. Oops. Alt Q. I should do the shortcuts here. Okay, so let's figure out our shadow. We have this light here, and I think instead of having to use a blur shadow shader, we can actually just tell the light that yeah, here's a no shadow. Let's go here and we'll do the fast shadow accept. And I think because we've got it in area light mode, it says point light here, but as you saw above, we use this grid area shape here with the size. So it should give us a soft shadow. Let's take a look at that. And there's no, in the default scene, it gives you an ambient light, and I didn't set up an ambient light in this one. So we do have this really pitch black area that's outside where the area light hits. Yeah, now we're starting to see area light, and it has 16 samples, so it's a little shredded. It's a little chattery looking, but we'll worry about that later. Okay, there's our render. Looks pretty nice. I mean, it's you know, it's not refined yet, but we've got a nice cube there and a nice little soft shadow. Probably can make this a little bit of a bigger area light. And then we'll go, let's get out of here real quick, and we'll go tweak the light a little bit more. I think I'm going to move it over a smidge. So we'll select the light. And we'll just move it over and rotate it a smidgen. Let's see, I'll do like this and that. And then we'll make it a little bit bigger. So 1.5, yeah, we'll make that just like a super soft shadow. Okay, we'll leave that there. And we'll get onto something better now. So you've seen it, you know, you've seen me set up like donut and torus and spheres and things before. So we won't get into that yet, although we should make a shader. I'll show you how to get a shader going, which we did in the previous video. So that's the next step, is that we have this floor and this thing, this cube, and we'll do some shaders. So we have to go from the object mode down here into shaders, and there's nothing in the scene. And usually what I do when I'm using Mantra is there's this whole list of shaders here. There's like RenderMan, which I hope I can get RenderMan running in Houdini. That'll be a lot of fun to play with the you know, displacement things in here. A lot of the tricks you can do in Houdini work very well with RenderMan. But what we're going to do first is we're just going to do the Vex super material. It's basically like a generic, you know, it's got Fong, it's got like Fong and Blend, kind of handles all your stuff. If you want a Lambert, you just shut off the specular. And so we'll do this first one. We'll call this one like green cube, which we can, you know, copy into something else. We'll set the diffuse to green. Make that up a little bit here. Close. I do want to get this into reflection a little bit. We'll do that later because it costs some for reflection. And I don't really need to mess with the specular. I'll turn it down a little bit. Leave a little bit of something on there. And we'll fix that later when we get into more detailed rendering. But we have this cube, and then what I want to do is tab. Thought I did that in even Houdini 5.5. I think I was doing that. We'll just copy that over. Okay, so then we'll do the floor. Make a very basic floor. And the floor will have 0 specular. Close, and we'll do that. So we've got these two surfaces. I'll turn the floor down a smidgen here, just a little bit in brightness. Close. Okay, so we've had those two shaders. Let's go back out, and the way you apply them is we go out to the objects here, and we'll go floor, and then in the shading tab, there's this little area here with the shader operator surface, and if we click in here, we can go down here and you can see we've got the two items. So we're picking the floor. So I'll say, hey, I want that one to be the floor. And so that's in our shader tab. And then we'll do the same thing. We'll go to cube and we'll go to shading tab, and the surface will pick green cube, and this should show up. There we go. Yeah, so now that looks like a green cube. And let's take a look at that. I'll save this scene now that we're getting a little bit into it. Save as, let's go to hip, and then we'll go basic setups. Okay, and let's take a look through the camera. Boom, and take a look at what this guy looks like. The bigger shadow. Okay, there we go. Pretty cool. Now the area light's larger, so it diffuses the shadow, softens the shadow up quite a bit. I really like this fall off here. No ambient light yet, so this is like pitch black outside the light. And what we'll do is, I think what we want to do is now, instead of doing the checkered floor and all the other items, we're going to do some creative. We're going to do some creative things here that are more Houdini, specific to like the Houdini philosophy. Okay, so what I want to do, let's get rid of this cube for a minute. We'll just let that disappear. We'll bring that back when we need it. And what I'll do is I want to create a star. So let's go create a geo node, and we'll do this with star. And we'll do some creative stuff here. I'm going to move this up on the plane. 0.5. And then we'll jump in here and we'll create a star. So how are we going to create a star? I'm going to start with a circle, and I'm going to make that circle out of polygons, because polygons have these points, and we like 10. And what we want to do though is slightly modify our circle. And I guess I'll just have to go up here. We'll have to move this up a little bit. So our star is going to be up like, well, I guess it's going to be up a whole. Yeah, okay, we'll do it like that for now. Move that guy up off the floor, and then in here. Whoop. Get zoomed into it here. There we go. Space bar G. Okay. Let's turn this into a star. The thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to do some transform here, because I want to build it in here. So we're going to tab and make a transform node, because I need to rotate this guy before I start editing the points, so that we have one point is straight up. So with the transform node turned on, we're going to get into rotate here on Z, and we'll just pull it over there until it's like, looks like that guy's at the top. Yeah, I guess that line at the bottom is a good center point here. Okay, then we want to do an edit, just like we were doing before. And I'll tweak this and this, and we want to grab the points again. Select, and let's make the points appear. And no, we don't want. We want every other point here. So I'll shift that guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy, and then so I had to shift right click. Okay, there we go. Shift right click is the trick, not just right click. All right, so we have that. So we're going to now use this center scale to bring these guys in. Oops. Right, which one am I scaling here? That's that and that. I'm gonna grab this center point here. I thought, oh yeah, no, we can use this right here. Yeah, so scale these guys down to get ourselves a nice looking star. And then now that we have that, we're gonna build thickness from it. Though interestingly enough, this guy looks like it wasn't centered correctly. So shift, it's very interesting how that was, the shift was the right function. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this up a little bit, because this does seem like it's not quite centered exactly. That's kind of a nice looking star anyway. All right, so that's a cool thing. And then we'll go down here and we're going to extrude. And we want, first we're going to create this first face. So we get this extrusion, but I don't want it super thick. So we've got this nice star here, and then I will take, what is it, the depth? Yeah. I'm going to move this down, just need a smidge of a thing. And then what we want to do that makes this more interesting is now if I did an extrude again, it would extrude all the faces, but we don't want all the faces. We just want, there's the point numbers. Let's see if I can get the primitive numbers here. No. Is that it? Yeah. So I turn on the primitive numbers. You see 0, and what's the one on the back? And 1. 0 and 1. So maybe let's check this out with like hidden line invisible. Yeah. 1 and 0. And maybe if I do this with wireframe, yeah, there we go. So this is important to know, these normal faces, because now when I do actions on this, like I want to run another extrude, I'll let it know 0, 1 on the next extrude. So let's do another extrude, and we can filter the data in right now. So the source group will be 0, space 1, and then when we run this extrude to here, it should only run the front and the back instead of all of them. There we go. See, so I didn't run everything. And if I did, let's see, that's 1. See, if I got rid of one of these, it would probably only do the back one, right? Yeah, or it did only did the front one, running 0. So you can see here I can do that. And then like say I wanted to do the third one, 3, bam, right? And so you can see I can be very specific about which data I'm filtering in and out of these things. And so this is a pretty cool, you know, Houdini feature that's been around since the get-go, I believe. And so now we know what those guys are doing. And then what we want to do is we want to transform these end ones. So we got 22 and 10. We're going to do a couple of different kinds of transforms here. And then I think when we transform, I can pull this extrude back because I don't need it to be that thick, but at least it gives us something to look at here. So let's pull this back out, smooth shade, and then let's do hidden line visible. I guess we'll just stick with wireframe for now. So we got 10 and 22 are the faces. And so what we'll do is we'll go down here and then we're going to do a transform. Again, and we'll do this only transform 10, comma 22 as the output goal for this next node. Grab that guy, plug him in here, hit this guy, and now we've got this transform node. And we want it to be scaled on the, not on the Z. We want it to be scaled on the X. So if we go 0.1, yeah, there we go. And Y 0.1. But what is interesting here is we have this, like, if I look at this, let's check this on the smooth shaded. We have this, like, the centers are thing, but the faces aren't following it. And it's because on the extrude, there should be a text box that says, is that it? There's like a way to tell it to stick the faces, right? Consolidate faces to mesh. Boom. There we go. So now we're getting a kind of a cool little effect there. And then because of that, we're kind of creating this cool, like a star that would be on like a military uniform, like a button. So now we go back to the extrude and let's go back to the depth, and you see I can pull this back and make ourselves, make this look more like the kind of thing that we would put on a motion graphics kind of star here. Plus I can go back to the first extrude and I can probably take this down a little bit too. We don't need it that thick anymore. And also on the transform, because we're going to basically collapse this guy. Let's go 0.01, 0.01, yeah. And then that's that. And now we have this really cool looking piece of geometry. Matter of fact, I could probably put those down even, maybe because 0 and 0, yeah. Let's turn off the numbers and see what we got here. Cool. But you can see this extrude here. It looks like it's a little bit, still a little bit too thick. So 05, there we go. Okay, so we've got this cool star. What are we gonna do with this cool star? I guess we could color it yellow. Let's go get it a shader, and let's go over to the shader land here. Get out of objects, and we'll go back into shaders. And can I copy paste? That time it worked. Yeah, Control C, Control V. It's just weird. I didn't think that. Okay, so then we have yellow star, and then I can tell this guy we want it over here in yellow land. Close, and then let's go back out into objects. And we'll tell our star we want it to be yellow, the yellow star shader. Bam, there she goes. So we've got this cool star. Now, what else can we do with this thing? We've got a cube and a star, but why don't we make a circle of stars around the cube? And so let's do that. So let's take this star. And then we'll jump into the star here, and we already have our little setup for the star. Kill that. And what we want is I need to create a circle again. So we'll go circle. And let's take a look at it here. Orientation, X and Y. Let's go Y and Z. Nope. Let's go Z and X. There we go. So it's this way by default. And we need points, so we have to do polygon. And so there's our points. And we could say, let's see if we do the radius here. So how wide it is, yeah, 2 by 2. And then we will use a Copy SOP. And the Copy SOP will allow us to tab copy. Now we can take this circle here and use it as basically the source points. So let's see if I have this star and we say, hey, I want to copy you. Star. Now if we just kept this copy SOP straight, we could do copies like 2 or 3, right? And then if I did this translate, is that it? Let's see here. Oh, we're not looking at the copy SOP, sorry. Click that, and then if I do a translate, stars start coming out of it, right? So I can do this, and we could make a bunch of row of stars. It's kind of a fun, just fun to play with in general. So let's play with this for a second before we end up where we go. So let's do a bunch of these, and then you can, because they are slightly, got this transform cumulus thing here, that if you do rotate, let's see if I do this here, you'll notice that they rotate more the further away it gets. I'm not quite sure. I don't know if this is this transform cumulative thing. Yeah, there's some sort of like reason for that that is pretty cool. Now if I ran another copy SOP, you know, just to get a little bit fun, if I just said copy again, and then we ran another one into another one here. Let's click this guy into here just to show off this neat little trick this does. Then we could do, let's do 2 or 3, and then let's translate this way. You know, like, or we could go, let's see, how many could we go? Yeah, and then you could get into this thing where you could really build some cool motion graphics with this. This is kind of a neat, like, basically creating backgrounds and animate that, a bunch of these going, you know, around the camera, and, or rotating or something like this. And so that's a lot of fun playing with a copy SOP. But we're going to be a little bit more specific here. So that's one trick, but I'm going to get rid of this guy now, and I'm going to take this copy SOP back down to its default. Here we'll go that to 0 and 6, and then with 1 point, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this guy. I'm going to turn this on here using this button. I'm using this little pink button here to kind of ghost it. So show it to me, but don't shade it, so I can see what's going on here. You can see there's that circle, our little thing here, and let's go up to it, and let's make this thing maybe 3 by 3, maybe 4 by 4. Okay, and now I'm going to use the circle as the, you know, the points on the circle to tell the copy SOP where the stars go. So if I take this circle here and we plug it into this other side, bam, we get this cool situation here. And what do we got here? Can we rotate to normal? Yeah, we're not going to use rotate to normal. And the thing that's really cool about this too is do some animation here. There's a way to run, I'll show you this with a couple of attributes here, but you can see this is radius and everything like that. So if I had, I guess what we could do just to play with this is that we'll put a transform node. There's a couple different ways to do this. You could do this with an object up on the top level too to drive it, which I'll show you how to do with it. There's a thing called like copying attribute. You're like making a reference to an attribute. So we've got this transform node, and I'm going to plug this guy into the transform node first, and then out of the transform node into the copy SOP. So boom. And then our transform node gives us the ability here, like if we want to rotate this on Y, let's go up here. And then you could do some really cool like motion graphic stuff here with this, you know, have those guys orbiting the cube that's in the middle. So if we go out here, objects, we've got our little yellow stars. I suppose we could make our floor a little bigger here. Let's make the size like 30 and put it far away here so we got some stuff to catch some shadows. And then objects, and where's our light? Gotta get our light back a little bit more. Oh, we got everything selected here. Let's pull the light back a little bit. Oop. All right. And so there's our star collection, and then we've got our cube. And boy, those stars are big. But let's go check it out here. So we've got that. Now I can see the scene here. So what we want to do is let's take this guy here. Is this? I guess I can move it down here, and then radius 3 by 3, and then these guys, before they end up in the copy SOP, I'm just going to do a general transform that I'll just do to the whole item, and then we can control the scale of the individual stars here, so I can take them all down like that. And the thing that we can also do is, now that we've got, if I scale them down here to a smaller size, we can then go over here to the circle and give it more points. So what do we have? We have 10 divisions. So we could go, you know, basically put a whole bunch of them out there. And then we could rotate them. But you know, what's really tricky is that going inside of a SOP to animate, it's a little bit tedious. And so what we can do is we can take an attribute from outside the SOP to drive one that's inside of a SOP. So let's say here, got this transform, and I'll drive it with a null, maybe. Let's see here. I'm going to go to the top. So here's another trick that's kind of fun to do in Houdini, is that we'll make a geo node, and we'll call this the stars rotation. Or even I can go stars anim, right? Like it's like an animation node for this stars thing. And what we'll do is, let's start with the rotation one first. We'll go right click on the rotation up here in the stars anim, and we'll go rotate, and I'm going to say copy parameter. So I'm basically saving the parameter of these as a general, like it's like a variable, almost like I'm making a reference to it. And then we'll go inside this star thing into our star geo, and I'll go into this transform, and I'll right click on this rotate, and I'm going to say paste relative reference. And so now it says, you can see this channel's got 2. It's diving down in here and saying, hey, I'm using this as basically whatever this attribute is, whatever this parameter is, I'm gonna mirror it here, like, so it's just copying it. So now for up to here on the top level, I can be inside this and I can animate this from here. So now I've got this really cool way to control this at the top level. That's a really neat thing. The other thing that's weird is that it looks like I have, oh, it's in the stars anim thing here. I got this file I can turn off. We don't need you. We gotta get rid of you. Yeah, you're just there for the. So there we go. And so yeah, that's right now it's just the rotate. Let's see if I did this, like, yeah. Right now I can't change the translate, but we'll just do the whole thing. So we'll go copy parameter again on the translate, dive back down here into the star, and on this transform we'll go paste relative reference. So now you have that, and the same thing. This is a really neat way to run stuff in Houdini, to know some of these tricks here. And I suppose we could do scale. We'll go copy parameter, the scale, star, and so we're making that item at the top level talk to something inside of another node. Paste relative reference. There we go. And so now if that's successful, anything that I do on this stars anim node, yeah, so we can animate them out like that, or we can rotate them here, and we can make them move up, down, all that stuff. And so those are just, that's running something. These parameters are talking to the parameters down inside here in the surface operator. And so there's that. So let's look at the camera. And then, yeah, we go, okay, we scale them up, scale them down. Let's translate them down a little bit. All right. Put them kind of on the floor, maybe. And then what I could do is on the star, and I could run another thing to kind of control this for the star itself. So let's see if I did. Yeah, see, like those guys are all turning together. I could create random per point parameter here. So let's see, X. Let's flatten them out here a little bit. And they're all kind of facing towards the light to cast a shadow here. Okay, that's pretty fun. And how far are we in here? So there's that, and then let's save this. And we got some more particle tricks here to show you. Let's click this guy. Okay, I just speed that up so you can see the finished render here. And pretty cool. We got this little row of stars around it, this circle of stars, a parade of stars around the cube. Yeah, using this Copy SOP, showing you how to kind of model and control what the tools are doing by choosing the numbers of the faces, displaying which numbers they are, and doing very specific functions. And so now you can edit, verts and faces based on, the data that Houdini is able to show you. And so those are pretty good tricks to know. So now what do we do? We've got some other things we want to try before we get further along. And I want to show a particle system. What we'll do is, let's shut off some of this stuff here. Let's go quit here, and then we will close this display of the points. And I'm going to hide the cube and the stars for now. We don't need the animation for that. And I want to build a thing. I'm going to build a plane that's like the grid that we're going to drop the particles from. So we'll do another geo. And we'll call this rain particles. Yeah, do that. We'll go in here, hit enter, get rid of this file guy, and we're going to create a grid again. And now let's check out our wire shade here, because we want to put enough points on this that it gives us enough of the whoops, I'm doing the wrong thing here. Here we go. Let's go back in our camera. There we go. Okay, so there's a grid, and I want to have this guy drop particles for us. But in order for that to be cool, we need to do some things first. So let's do the center. Let's put you up at like 8 maybe. How high is that? Is that too high? Oh, yeah, that's about right. I guess that's good. Maybe 10. Okay, and then we'll make our size 15 by 15 maybe. Maybe that's too much. Maybe 10 by 10. 8 by 8. Okay. Now let's try to look at this just regular wireframe for the moment. Okay, that's a pretty good size. I would like to move it back on Z. Yeah, I guess we can move it back on Z here a little bit so we're more in the light. And what we want to do is drop particles from that. So like what we'll do is we'll start there, and I'll start to build it up. So, and it'll explain what's going on. So we'll go particles, and if you aren't typing it, let's just do this. Let's go in here, and you can see there's a particle section here, and there's particles. I'll bring that guy up, and then we will connect the grid and say, hey, just rain particles. And so I press this guy, grid disappears, and I press play, and we get this something starting to happen here. Let's turn that on here. So turn on the points. So you kind of see like, oh, okay, it's starting to make particles here. If I stop it, rewind it, you'll see it like they start to come out. And it's very uniform. It's like it kind of starts with number 1. You know, you imagine that these are numbered, which I imagine will do that. Yeah, so you got this 0, 1, and so it's just counting through them basically one particle per frame. And what we want to do, because that's probably set also that the birth rate here is what it is. We got particle system here, and there's forces, there's turbulence and stuff. We're going to get in that in a moment. There's particles. And so, yeah, we have like 100 birth rate, life expectancy is 1,000 seconds. And there's a variable for life, so you can make them die at a random. And we definitely need to add some attributes for mass and drag here in a moment. But we have to deal with the fact that these are coming out uniform. And so what I want to do is we want to change that, you know, going down basically counting down the vert names, or the vert numbers, and do a thing called a sort. And a sort has in it this point sort, and we're going to go random. And I want to do this to this, and this to this, to see if it'll give us our random. So we'll go here. There we go. So now you see when it creates the points, they're creating them at different things. What we should do, actually I should show you, is that before we go even into that, let's try to create under the forces. We should have just been pulling this guy down here. So we'll go -2 on the external force down, and then you will see, at least as they're being born, you know, they're going down, and it's just creating a layer after layer of those points. And then, like we were talking about, it lasts too long. So if we say 100, it's birthing like at a rate of 100, and we'll do life expectancy is like 1,000 seconds. Let's try to do like 4 seconds. I think they'd probably disappear around the floor. Yeah, so that's pretty good. So we've got that. So we'll do life expectancy 4.5 or something like this. And now that we're doing this sort, we're saying, hey, we want you to randomize this. And you can see here already with that. Yeah, now we've got enough randomization here that it looks like rain. And we could change, I think, on the sort. We could do a random, so it's even more random. Or why don't we just do $? Was it $ frame? Yeah, this might actually, by using the frame number, it might even be more random. Yeah, there we go. So now we're getting some weird stuff going on. That's one way of doing that. Actually, I kind of liked how it was before. Just seed. Undo, undo. Because I want to, yeah, I kind of like this as a little bit more something. Okay, so another thing, if we turn on our grid here, is that it's coming from these points, and it's a little bit too much like a grid. What we can do, what's really fun, first of all, we'll make them a little bit closer together. So we have this 10 by 10 rows. Why don't we go like 20 by 20? So there's that. And now you've got a lot more points to have them birthed from. But they are all being born right at this line. And so what's fun here, and this is actually a fun little thing we can do, is we want to we can make this grid change as how it's being. We want to deform it. So this is a fun trick too. So like I'm gonna use this thing called the Mountain VEX, which has been with Houdini forever. If we go into filters, and we get this whole group here. And there's this thing called this Vex, so it's like these like vertex operation here. And I'm going to pull this right out of the grid, and we're going to plug this into the mountain, and I'll just invoke this first, and you can see it's basically kept putting like a fractal noise in there. I'm going to turn off the grid here so you can kind of see it distorted. And there's this like amount, you can mess with this stuff here, so you can see here that like there's like 0 height, and then we're putting a noise through it here. And then there's like fractal, the amount of fractal depth. I'll just usually do about 4. There's some roughness you can add to it here. And what is interesting, there's different noises. So there's Perlin noise, there's sparse convolution, and then there's this alligator noise. And I'll go back to the Perlin real quick here. Now, this is kind of neat. It's doing something, but it's kind of like if we use this offset stuff here, you can actually kind of see it animate. So let's move it on X here. And you can see there's that. Let's do a little bit slower here. Yeah, see there's the X. It's kind of like moving it along the X plane. Basically, it's like a world space noise. And then we've got move it on the Y plane and move it on the Z plane. So you can see it kind of crawling forward and back there. And this is a very cool thing. And let's, like, if we do the height here, let's really make it fat. And what I want to do, oh, there's also the frequency too. So actually what we can do is the grid is, why don't we make this like 25, 25. So we really got a lot of rows of stuff happening here. And then maybe 30, 30. Get some more detail on that guy. Now we're here, and let's see, Perlin noise is sparse. Yeah, look at this. That's pretty wide stuff happening there. So it's like the conundrum of, do we want to put keyframes here, or do we want to animate at the top level? And so this is kind of a neat, another use of that trick I showed you earlier, which is that we can, let's turn off the points here real quick, is we'll use kind of the same idea. We'll do, is there like a generator, like a null, and I'll use this as like Mountain Anim, right? And so same thing here. So we're going to do translate, copy parameter, go into this particle biz here, and on this mountain for this offset, I'll paste relative reference. And so now if we go up here to this top level and we use this guy, we can animate it at the top level because we're, you know, basically using the move tool. So if I even hit enter, I can use this gimbal to drive it, you know, and then I can set a keyframe and basically make it do, you know, it's driving that SOP down inside, but it's paying attention to the stuff that's happening up here when you're animating. And I like this because then you don't have to hop in and do keyframe changes. You can just, you have your controls at the top level. This is another really neat trick to play with here. Just distorting a mesh like this is really fun. It just looks cool. It looks really neat. Let's turn on the smooth shaded wireframe here. I'd have to get the light above it, I guess, if we look at it down here. And that's just fun. That's just like old school VFX coolness. You can still do this today, but it was so neat. Okay, so why do we need this? Why am I distorting this thing? Well, that field of particles was coming from a pretty uniform line. You know, it was like being birthed all on this flat plane, and so it's like, yeah, I'm gonna create this, and then when we have this situation going on here with the particles being born, we'll see if they respect the geometry. So The other thing we do need is we need a point SOP because I want to add. So let's do this here. We'll plug this mountain down into this guy. We got our sort, and then we want to go to particles. Boom. And now let's test that out. So now you see they're at all different heights. You know, they're coming out at different spaces and everything. It's not quite like a flat plane. There's stuff burnt above. Let's do this here. Stop that. Okay, let's turn those points on. You can see them a little easier that way. Yeah, I see those. Some are born up high and some of them aren't. And so you just have this thing. And that's not even animated. Like that's just that thing. They're just being born out of the different shape here. And what I would do actually is, in order to give that a kind of a randomness, is that we'll want to go back here to the beginning. We'll grab our mountain anim. I'm going to set keyframe here, and then we'll get it all the way down here and to the end of the timeline, and I will move that guy around, and we'll move this guy around here, and basically, you know, commit the changes. And now that if we go in here and we look at this guy, we know that this is animated. This is animating because that's moving on the top level. And our particles will also be birthed that way. But what we also want to do is, you'll notice here when I play the particles, they fall, and they're basically calculating live. And then if I try to drag them back, you see they don't go backwards. That's just because it's live caching. So we're going to tab and we're going to create a cache file. And this allows this to cache this to memory, which is very useful for us. But before we even go into the cache, I still want to do one more thing, which is I want to do a point SOP because I want to change the particle. Let's see if I can do this right here. Not keep mass drag. We're going to add mass drag. So we're going to have a mass attribute and a drag attribute. And what I want to do is we're going to randomize this $particle just a little bit. And on the drag, we're going to randomize this $particle and plus 500. Down in the particle, we do need, we're not adding them here because they're added above, but we do need forces. And so I'm going to go in here and add turbulence 1, 1, 1, and then we'll go 0.5. And now if we go back and calculate this, this is a little bit longer to calculate, but we'll see a nice difference in the way that it moves. Okay, so there's our new, and there's a little hiccup in the middle of it, but you can see it moves really nice now. There's like a little bit of a different motion here where these guys are flowing around here, and I gotta fix something in the cache. So let's go back here, and so clear that out. Let's clear that off. And then what I want to do also is, let's do like 0.5, put some wind in there, and then I'll double these up a little bit. So I got stuck there. Okay, turbulence period, put that at 1, and then we'll try to clear the cache and run it again. Okay, there's our cache. Oh, it looks really cool now. Zoom around that. Oh yeah, that's a lot of fun. That's gonna be fun. You see a little bit of trails, like a little bit of directional trails off the back of those little guys too. Okay, so now what do we do with this? We've got this. These guys could render as spheres, and then we'd have some neat little raining down spheres. But I think what we're going to do is we'll run a copy SOP on each one of these guys and put that cube that I made earlier on them. So let's stop that. So we've got it cached, so we can run back and forth here. And let's see if it can manage the geometry from that cube before. So we're going to go back out of here, and I'm going to go grab my cube. I'll go dive in here. I'm going to just get this whole thing, copy. We'll go out here to there and go into our particles. Bam. I'll paste my cube stuff in here. And it kind of came in and took over the cache because their blue thing was on. So let's see here, we've got our cache. And what do we have? We've got this, like, let me turn on my cube on pink here to see how big it is. It is pretty large. So what we should do is we'll do a transform. Oop, no. Transform. And then we can take that cube down in size a little bit here. I guess I don't have to do it there. I could do it up top. Yeah, I'm kind of being redundant here. The box. And we'll just do it here because it's already kind of set up. So I'll just rescale it back. So transform. And we're just going to uniform scale this down. So it's kind of like one of those little, something that we can put on our particles. And let's try to take a look at that. And hopefully there's not too much geometry. This might actually be dangerous memory wise, but I think it'll look cool if we can pull it off here. So we'll save. And let's do copy SOP. Copy, boom. And we do want, oh, this is on the wrong side, so we're going to take you guys over here. Wrong side of the copy SOP, yeah. And we'll take this transform into the copy SOP, and then this particle cache here, and what do we end up with? Boom. Now it's got a copy geometry over. This is what, I'll check that out. Hey, here we go. Well, yeah, I don't need to select those guys. All right, let's turn off our points here. That's kind of fun here. So now we've got this. Boy, it is tricky for it to, it's having a hard time keeping up with all geometry. Okay, one of the things I did want to test before we go to rendering is I wanted to see these cubes flying around on the particles, and if we take the detail down to the basic cube, it should be light enough geometry to watch them move. So let's see here if I can get this. Yeah, it's a lot of fun here. Just roll those guys forward like this. Put the camera in that mess and see it all. Kind of fun to see him change direction. Okay, let's see if we can get this render going. All right, it gives everybody green cubes. And what I want to do is let's go back to the shader operator here. And what I want to do on the green cube, I'll give it a little bit of reflection. So I am going to get rid of the, let's see, close. I am going to get rid of the spec. We're going to go to the reflection here. 0.130. Oh. And close, so that's reflective now. And what we do, I'm going to have to do my usual thing so we can get some cool highlights on it. Okay, got that. Let's see, go back to camera 2. Turn on particles. File, save scene. Let's check our light. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, here it is. Here's the render. This took quite some time. This took hours and hours. I went to sleep and woke up and it was ready to go, but I think this was like it must have been like a 10-hour render or something like that. This is super slow. Mantra is slow. I did add more samples to the area light in one of the time lapses, and it's still a little shredded. It's just doing all these reflections and all this kind of thing is just slow for Mantra, which is why it will be cool to do, you know, if I can get RenderMan working with this, if I can get RenderMan working in Houdini here, then any of these Houdini builds, then I can do a lot of these same tricks and just render a lot faster with RenderMan, because it'll do an image like this in like 10-15 minutes versus this is like a 10-hour thing. And I don't even have the settings turned up. And this is the dual CPU Octane. And maybe it's slow because it's not utilizing both the processors or something like RenderMan does. But it's just exponentially slower. But it is a really cool image here. This is like neat motion graphic, you know, looking abstraction thing. I guess I could have done a more uniform like Copy SOP with a bunch of cubes, like a field of cubes or something like that. Would have been pretty neat with a little bit of animation on them. But there you go. That's Houdini 6.5 updated video with desktop capture for archive VFX. Thanks for watching.